Today's daf we're going to be learning is Chullin daf ayin chet. We're going to finish the fourth parak and move on to a completely different topic. Still within animals, but a different type of topic. So we're going to finish up with this very interesting topic of what we talked about, darchei mori and superstitions and what's allowed and what's not. So we saw it's pretty clear, in kovrinota, you can't bury this placenta at a crossroads, at this intersection. Specifically burying it in that particular spot was considered a superstitious thing that the Gentiles were doing at the time, whether they were Emorites or not. We call it darchei mori, but it's a general term for the non-Jewish community that they were living among. That was the general practice. You can't do it because it's like mimicking their customs. So Abai and Rava we've finished with this. Amrei travayu kol davar sheyesh bo refuah ein bo mishum darchei mori. If it actually heals, then it's not darchei mori. But if it doesn't, ein bo refuah, then it's a concern of this prohibition. Chananya, the Gemara says, but wait, isn't there a braita where it seems like we're doing things that don't actually heal? What is that? We have an ilan shemashir perotav. It has too much fruit on it. And because of that, the fruits start falling very early, before they're actually ready. And then basically that's a bad tree because we can't really benefit from the fruits. So if you want to fix it, what do? So krobasikha, you paint it red. V'toano ba'avanim, and you put heavy stones on it. So bishlama toano ba'avanim. That makes sense that it actually heals. What we're going to do is we're going to weaken the tree, which means that it's not going to be able to hold that many fruits. The fruits are going to start falling off, which is a good thing, because if some of the fruits fall off early, then the rest of the fruits will actually grow stronger, because there's just too many fruits on the tree, and because of that, none of them are growing properly. So that's actually useful. That's going to heal the tree. But why are we painting it red? That sounds like darchei mori. It sounds like a superstitious thing. Paint the tree red and that will help the tree get better. Obviously, there's nothing about that painting that's going to actually heal the tree. To which they answer, it's for a different reason. We thought it was either going to heal or it's superstitious. Now we're going to learn there's a third track, which is we want people to see this. People will see the tree is sick and they will pray for the health of the tree. Now, this is very interesting, first of all, because I want you to have in your mind this idea of praying for having mercy on trees, which is going to lead us into having mercy on animals, which is potentially the next topic of the next section, which we'll talk about soon. I think there's definitely a connection between ending with this and starting with the next chapter, which we'll, as I said, we'll see soon. But I'm not really sure if it's rachamim on the tree. This is also an issue we're going to get to in the next section. It's rachamim on the owner of the tree, right? We want to ask for rachamim on the tree so that the owner won't lose out on their fruits and their money and their financial means. So the real issue, I think, is not really that we're praying for the tree, the health of the tree, for the tree's sake, but for the human's sake, the owner of the tree. Now, where do we get this idea that we do something so that others will see and pray for rachamim? And this is a fascinating issue, and we've actually come across this a number of times already. Kiditanya tameh tameh yikra. It says in the Torah about the Metzorah that they should call him tameh tameh, whether he should be calling out tameh tameh, I'm tameh, or people should be saying about him tameh tameh. But you should make a big deal when someone's a Metzorah that everybody knows. What's the reason for this? Well, the reason generally in the simple reading, is so that people stay away from the leper, because the leper is supposed to be out of the camp and we want people to separate, maybe it's contagious. That seems to be the simple reading. But the braita says, Tzarich lehodia lerabim ve'rabim mevakshim alav rachamim. We want everyone to know so that people will pray for rachamim. Ve'chen. And likewise, anyone who's going through some sort of tragedy, some sort of struggle, some sort of disease. It's a beautiful idea that people should know. And you want people to know because you want people to ask for rachamim. You want people to pray for you. And that's a beautiful thing, right? You know that it's very interesting. People get sick, and there's some people who like to be quiet about it, right? And they don't want anyone to know they're sick. And then there's other people who basically, right, and fortunately now with the war, this goes on all the time. Anytime someone's injured, there's lists going around, pray for these soldiers. And in general, when people are sick. So it's something that it's a very beautiful idea about bringing everybody together to pray for rachamim for someone who's not well. Amar Ravina, and by the way, it doesn't even say sick here. It says irabo daval, right? Somebody went through something that they need help with. So, it's something to bring in other people, and they even say rabim, right? Not just tell your friends, but make it public so that people will ask for rachamim. And here, again, we started with the tree, but we end up getting here to humans. And Amar Ravina, and then just Ravina adds this one last line. Kiman talinan kufsa bedikla. According to who do we hang dates on a palm tree that's sick, right? Like bunches of dates. Kiman ki haitana. Obviously, like this tana, because hanging dates on a tree is not going to help the tree get better. But it is a sign, just like the red was a sign. Everybody knows it. Okay, obviously, how does everyone know? Because that's just what was customary. Everybody knows if they see red on a tree or they see dates hanging in clusters on a palm tree, obviously not dates attached, right? Dates hanging in a cluster. Everybody knows that, the tree is sick, we have to pray for it. And that's ki ha'itana, and that matches the tana of this braita that we just saw. And with that, hadran alach behema makasha. Okay, which I thought was interesting that we're ending this chapter about an animal that's struggling in childbirth. Right? It was the same idea that there was some struggle, and we kind of didn't focus on that so much, and it was all about the fetus and sticking its arm out. But maybe it's reminding us, don't lose sight of the fact that there's an animal struggling, and also we should have mercy and ask for mercy for the animal who's struggling in childbirth. So anyway, it's a very interesting way to end our chapter with this idea of praying for rachamim, and as I said, that's a bit of a lead into the next section. Okay, we're done with our first part of Masechet Chullin, and we're now moving on to the next section. We're now going to have chapter after chapter dealing with different topics. We're going to start with otov et beno, which we'll talk about in a minute what that is. We'll get to kisoy adam, which is covering the blood after you slaughter an animal. From there to gid anashe, the sciatic nerve, which is forbidden. And from there, we're going to get to kol basal, which is all about basar b'chalav. Okay, so if you're struggling a little bit in this Masechet, there is I would say a bit, these topics are a little different than before, and we are going to get to ultimately the basar b'chalav, milk and meat, which is super practical and interesting and relevant, and I think it'll be, for those struggling, I know some people are enjoying, some people are struggling with this Masechet, the content going forward is going to definitely, when we get to kol basal, but even a little before, we're switching genres a little bit. So, otov et beno is a prohibition. It says in the Torah, shul oseh, or vishor oseh. We're going to talk about that vav in a minute. And in a minute, I'll tell you the pasuk before. But and a shor or a seh, okay, an ox or a sheep. Otov et beno. Okay, now this is a little hard to translate into English. Oto means, because you're going to either have to say masculine or feminine. Okay, oto is masculine. Okay, but we'll see that it really means feminine, or at least feminine and masculine. Okay, it maybe is a better way of saying it. The animal and its son, lo tishchetu b'yom echad. You can't slaughter on the same day. Okay. The first thing to note is that the context of this pasuk is shor o kesev o ez ki violate v'haya shivat yamim tachad imo miyom hashmini v'hala yiratzeh lekorban yishel Hashem. Pasuk before, which we're going to connect to in the Gemara, is an animal can't be brought as a sacrifice in the first 7 days of its life. It can only be brought as a sacrifice on day 8. And then it has this pasuk. Okay, that's number 1. Okay, we're going to get back to that when we get to the Gemara. But the first thing I really want to talk about before we get into the Gemara is what is the reason for this prohibition. Okay, it sounds like, and I already kind of prefaced it by saying that this has something to do with mercy, right? It seems like a cruel thing to kill an animal and its offspring in the same day. Okay, so the commentaries have a machloket about this, and it seemed the machloket, and they even mention it, is the same machloket they have by shiluach haken, and we're even going to see in the Gemara is going to make reference to the comparison between the two, the end of today's daf, of sending away the mother bird, right? If you want to take the chicks, you have to send away the mother bird. Can't take the chicks while the mother bird is there, right? And that seems to be the same idea. You can't kill the son while the mother's there, or kill them both in the same day. That's cruel. Now, cruel to who? So there's a big machloket, Rambam and Ramban, same here and same in Shiluach HaKen. Again, they mention them both together. That is it. The Rambam says it's cruel to animals. And the Rambam basically says in Moreh Nevuchim, he says, listen, the animals have the same same as us in terms of they don't have seichel, but the love of a mother for offspring is the same in animals as it is for humans. That doesn't come from the seichel, right? It's very interesting. The love for your child doesn't come from the mind and the brain. It's an emotional thing that animals have as well. And therefore, it's cruelty to animals. Tsar ba'alei chayim. The Ramban says, no, it has nothing to do with that. This is for us to learn to have rachamim. Okay, it has nothing to do with animals. The animals are just a tool that we use. Don't behave in this way because that will teach you it's okay to be cruel to humans. But the issue is just to learn not to be a cruel person. And that's a very interesting machloket. The Sefer HaChinuch goes kind of with the Ramban and then adds another reason. There's a whole, you can listen about this, you get into the Tamei Mitzvot. In Sugya B'Tana, on the Hebrew side of our site, there's a whole shiur about Otovet. But no, one of the other things she raises, so she also goes into the Tamei Mitzvot. And another thing she raises there is the practicality of this mitzvah. And how do we deal with it in the slaughterhouses nowadays? And how do you know, or if you buy an animal, how do you know that, the mother wasn't sold and you're going to end up slaughtering them on the same day? And it's all sorts of practical problems with the actualization of this mitzvah. If we're talking about extra shiurim, so Alana Steinhand's shiur is about legal loopholes. And she talks about a particular loophole that is used with Otovet Beno if they fall into a pit, Otovet Beno on the same day, and it's Yantif. And you can only take them out of the pit to save them if you need the animal. Now, why would you need the animal? You need it for slaughtering, but you can't slaughter them both on the same day. So how do you get them both out of the pit, and how do you save them? And she talks about legal loopholes, and that's what her book is all about. It's a favorite topic of hers, and she uses an example to talk about legal loopholes and when they're used and when they're not used, and it's a really great shiur if you want to think about legal loopholes. If we're learning Gemara, it's something that comes up all the time, right? And it's a topic she knows a lot about. So those are some interesting shiurim to delve into about these topics. So let's start. Otovet beno noheg bein ba'aretz bein b'chutz la'aretz. This structure, by the way, is going to go throughout our Masechet in most of I didn't even talk about the chapters that are going to come after Kol HaBasar. We'll talk about some other things. They're all going to have a very similar structure other than Kol HaBasar, which we'll mention that has a different way of starting. But they're all going to say, is it in Israel and outside of Israel? Is it a mitzvah when the temple times or not the temple times? Is it in Chullin or also in sacrifices? Okay, and they're going to go through all these things about all of them. So let's get started with ours. This prohibition is anywhere you are, which makes sense. It's not really a mitzvah connected to the land in any way. Again, it has nothing to do with the time of the temple or not the time of the temple, right? It's at all times. All animals, whether they're sacred or non-sacred animals. Okay, we'll talk about where we get this from. That's going to be the first question in the Gemara. Now, since we said Chullin u'muktashim, we're going to take a break. And you might see the Mishnah is very long. You might say, oh, great, we have such a long Mishnah. It's going to make it really easy. Well, this Mishnah happens to be, I think, more complicated than the Gemara today. So brace yourselves. There's 12 different permutations here. Okay, if you want to feel better about it, so Tosfot points out, they could have even had 16. So lucky for us, they only did 12 and not 16. But we're going to have all different permutations of slaughtering an animal inside the temple or outside inside the temple courtyard or outside the temple courtyard, and whether it's chulin or non-chulin, right, or mukdashim, whether it's non-sacred or a sacrificial animal, and where it was slaughtered, and you did. Again, it and its offspring on the same day. Okay, so you'll see in a minute if I wasn't clear yet. Chulin b'chutz. Okay, we're going to go like they were both chulin and they were both slaughtered outside, and then we're going to have they were both sacrifices and they were both slaughtered outside, and then we're going to have they were both chulin and they were both slaughtered inside, or they were both kachim and they were both slaughtered outside inside, and then we're going to basically go through what if one was this, one was that, and we're going to keep changing up things. I was thinking like the game set. I may reference that once before in class, right? Each time you change one thing, okay, one parameter, and we're going to talk about what are all the ramifications in not just in Otovet Beno, but in other areas as well. Like shchutei chutz, if you remember, you're not allowed to slaughter kachim outside the temple, or bringing chulin la'azara, you're not allowed to slaughter chulin in the temple courtyard. Now, there's a difference, and I'll already kind of set up some of the differences here. If you slaughter a sacrifice outside the temple courtyard, you're going to get karet and lashes, okay? Now, this is a machlokah we had in Makot. When we say you get karet and lashes, do you get them both? Or is lashes, karet is God-given? So does it mean if you get the lashes, if the court gives you lashes for it, some people think that you don't actually get karet anymore. Some people think it's both. This Mishnah, which is going to mention both karet and lashes, seems to hold that you get both. Even if you got lashes in court, you're still going to get karet by God. Okay? No one really knows what karet is exactly, but it's some sort of getting cut off, right? That God's going to either, children will die before you, or you'll die younger than you should have. Okay? But it's a God-given punishment. So there's no real ramification to the machloket about whether, there's no ramification in our world that we can do anything about whether it absolves you from getting karet or not, right? It either does or doesn't. It's just they have different approaches about whether getting the malkut is already kind of gives you the rehabilitation. You don't actually need to get the karet anymore, but again, God's going to give it, so we don't really know. So that's kachin b'chutz. You're going to, number one, get karet and lashes. Just for that. Forget about otovet beno, which you also get lashes for. If it's chulin that you do inside, so Rashi says, what's the source for that? It's from the pasuk ki yirchak mimcha makom, right? When you get far away from the temple and you want to sacrifice, we've seen this pasuk many times, you can then slaughter your animals, v'savachta v'achalta. So Rashi says the drasha is birichuk makom. If you want to eat your chulin and just not bring it as a sacrifice, so you have to eat it outside. You can't eat it inside. But if you notice, it never says you can't eat it inside. So there's no negative prohibition, so you don't get lashes. You for sure don't get karet. Okay, but you don't even get lashes because there's no negative prohibition. It's just you didn't fulfill the positive commandment of make sure to eat your chulin outside, don't slaughter or slaughter them outside, don't slaughter them inside. So if you slaughter them inside, you've gone against, you transgress a positive commandment, you're not going to get lashes because there's no negative commandment. So those are a few principles. We're going to see that there's all these principles that are relevant as we go on in each of the different cases, and some are employed in this case and some are employed in that case. By the time we get to the later ones, you might be already super confused, but on the other hand, the issues are going to repeat themselves, so it won't be so complicated because you'll understand it as we go along. Okay, but we do start with the simpler cases. Chulin b'chutz. So they're both chulin, the animals. You slaughter an animal and its offspring on the same day. They're both chulin, and you slaughter them both outside. So shneim kshirim. This is a fascinating line. Just this one line. They're both kasher, meaning, well, in the end, you slaughtered two animals, okay? Vasheni sofeget ha'arba'im. Now, the person who slaughtered the second animal gets lashes because they transgressed otovet beno. However, shneim kshirim. What does that mean? Well, you can eat the meat. Okay, this is really interesting. Why is it interesting? So Rashi says this isn't interesting at all. Rashi says mishum debayim in eseifa shneim psulim, and that's why they said shneim kshirim. In other words, they only said shneim kshirim to contrast it. But of course you can eat it. It was slaughtered. Okay, what do you mean? Of course you can eat it. It was slaughtered. What do you mean? You slaughtered it against the law. You're not allowed to slaughter the second animal. We're going to call this a kosher shchita when the shchita was forbidden, right? So Tosfot says. On Daf Pei, it comes up in Tosfot. He says, because later the Gemara is going to deal with this line, that you might have thought, lo tochal kol toeva. It says, don't eat anything despicable. And maybe this is despicable because it was prohibited, and that's why the Mishnah has to tell you. So both of them think that you can eat the meat, because obviously the Mishnah says you can eat the meat. The question is, Rashi thinks it's obvious that of course you can eat the meat, and Tosfot says, what do you mean? You transgressed. Your shchita was forbidden, so how can we allow this to be a kosher shchita? Right? It's a really interesting topic. The Bahag, the Baal HaChok Dolo from the time of the Gaonim, actually says something interesting. He says, we penalize you. Now, what's the story? You couldn't slaughter the animal today, but you could slaughter it tomorrow. So just like on Shabbat, you're not allowed to cook, and if you cook, you're penalized, right? You can't eat that food on Shabbat. So you're penalized. Now, someone else could eat it that day, but you are penalized, and you can't eat it on that day. You can eat it the next day. So he's the only one who puts in this knas, because in the end, the person transgressed something. It almost sounds like a mitzvah ba'avera a little bit, right? Now that's a little bit different, because that you're doing a mitzvah with something that, let's say, you stole. Here, you're doing something wrong, and yet you're allowed to benefit from it. It's very interesting. Well, okay, we're going to put that aside right now and keep going. So the first case is very simple. You can eat the meat, but you're going to get lashes for the second animal. Obviously, the first one you slaughter is not a problem, because you're allowed to slaughter any animal. It's only when you slaughter the second one that you've transgressed for slaughtering the second one. Kachim b'chutz. Okay, what if they're both sanctified animals? They were supposed to be sacrifices, and what did you do? You slaughtered the mother and its offspring outside the temple courtyard. So now you have two issues, otov beno, and also you slaughtered them outside. So harishon chayav karet. Okay, now, but here there's going to be an added element. The first one gets karet because of shchutei chutz. You would think both get karet because of shchutei chutz, right? It's kodshim b'chutz. But the second one is not going to get karet for shchutei chutz. Why? Because shchutei chutz is only, you're going to get karet when it could have been a sacrifice. The second one already can't be a sacrifice. It's what we call mechusar zman. It's not the right time. It's missing waiting. In other words, you should have waited till tomorrow. It's true you sanctified it as an animal for the temple and it should have been brought inside. But it couldn't be brought today because you already slaughtered its mother today. So now you can't slaughter it today. So the fact that you slaughtered it outside the temple, you don't get karet for that. So the first one gets chayav karet, ushnehem psulim, and both can't be eaten because if you slaughter kachim outside the temple, they're disqualified. You can't benefit from them. And shnehem sofkim et arba'im, and both are going to get lashes. The first one because of shchutei chutz, the second one because of otov beno, slaughtering an animal with, on the same day as its mother. By the way, it could be mother, son, either order, or mother, daughter. It could be, and it could be even father. We'll see there's a machloket about that. But the point is that, right, and the order doesn't matter. If you slaughter the offspring and then the parent, right, either which way you're obligated. I'm just giving the example. The first was the mother, then the offspring, but it doesn't have to be that way. Case number 3, chulin bifnim. They're both chulin, and you slaughtered them both inside. Okay, so chulin can't be slaughtered inside, but we said already, it's only not fulfilling a positive commandment, so there's no lashes for that. So shneim psulim, okay, chulin that you slaughter in the temple, you're not allowed to eat. Okay, so they're a problem because you slaughtered them inside the temple courtyard. Vasheni sofeget arba'im, and of course the lashes is only for the second person because of otov beno. Kodshim bifnim. Okay, case number 4. Now we have both are kodshim, and they were both done inside. So harishon kasheru patur. The first one's completely fine. You took an animal, you slaughtered it inside the temple courtyard. It was supposed to be done that way. Great. Hasheni, the second one, sofeget arba'im upasul. So now again, this was done. Well, it was kodshim, and it was done inside, so that's fine. Except you're not allowed to slaughter it at all, so you're going to get lashes for otov beno. And it's going to be disqualified because the problem here is that it couldn't be brought as a sacrifice that day. So that's why it's disqualified, because since it can't be brought as a sacrifice, because you already slaughtered the mother, and now you can't slaughter it in the temple. So, well, it's true, it's not shchutei chutz, because you did it in the right location, but you did it on the wrong day, so you can't eat it. Okay, case 5. So that was, just to review, we did both were chulin outside, both were kodshim outside, both were chulin inside, both were kodshim inside. Okay? Those were first 4 cases. Now we're going to change it around a little. We have a mix of chulin and kodshim. Okay? Now in this case, the first one was chulin, v'kodshim, the second one was kodshim, and they were both done outside. So, harishon kasheru patur, chulin outside, it was the first one, no problem, everything's fine, and you can eat it. Hasheni sofeget arba'im upasul. You did kodshim b'chutz, disqualified. Okay, but kodshim b'chutz. Now, again, it's not shchutei chutz here because you couldn't have brought them inside because that day you're not allowed to slaughter it. It's what we call mechusar zman. But you're not going to get karet, but you're going to get lashes because you're not allowed to do it for otov beno. And it's disqualified. You can't eat it because it's kodshim that were slaughtered outside on the wrong day. It's completely off. Kodshim v'chulin b'chutz. What if you reverse the order? First you did the kodshim outside, then you did the chulin outside. So harishon chayav karetu pasul. That's classic shchutei chutz. You took a sacrifice and you slaughtered it outside, and therefore it's karet and you can't eat it. Hasheni kasher. Well, you did the second one is actually kosher because you slaughtered it outside and it was chulin. But shneim sofkim et arba'im, you're going to get lashes for both. The first one because of shchutei chutz, the second one because of otov beno. Chulin v'kodshim bifnim. Now we're going to flip it back to chulin first, kodshim second, but now everything was done inside. So shnehem psulim, both are disqualified, okay, because the chulin was first, and you're not allowed to do that inside, so it's disqualified. And the kodshim was second, it was again mechusar zman, you're not allowed to bring it that day, so it's a problem. Then, Asheni Sofeget Arba'im, and then the second one you're going to get lashes for because it's otov beno. I see you're asking how can a fetus and the mother, it's not a fetus, it's an offspring, it's born already. We're talking about an animal that's born, and you can make an animal and its mother sacrifices, you just can't bring them together on the same day. Okay, kodshim v'chulin bifnim. Okay, we're in case number 8, now we're on the last of this section. We have kodshim and chulin. This time kodshim went first, then chulin went second, and it was all done bifnim, it was all inside. So Rishon Kasher Patur, the first one was perfectly fine. It was a sacrifice. It was done inside, so it's totally fine. Hasheni Sofeget Arba'im Upasul. Now you did the chulin inside. So first of all, it's not going to be kosher. And, because you're not allowed to do that, you're not allowed to eat chulin that was slaughtered inside. And, right, all these, by the way, you can't just not eat them. They're forbidden to benefit from. And the second one gets lashes because of otovet beno, right? The second one's always going to get lashes because of otovet beno. Okay, now we move to cases 9 through 12. This time we're going to have chulin. Okay, until now everything was either both were inside or both were outside. Now we're going to flip up, and then we had both were chulin, both were kodshim. Now we're going to have then we had it was a mix of kodshim and chulin. Now we're going to have it's a mixture of inside and outside. Okay, chulin b'chutz ubifnim. The first one was done outside. The second one was done inside. Both were chulin. So, Harishon kasheru patur. The first one is totally fine. Chulin b'chutz outside is fine. Hasheni sofeget arba'im upasul. The second one, you get lashes because of otovet beno, and it's disqualified because it was chulin inside. So you can't eat the meat. Case 10. Kodshim b'chutz ubifnim. Both were kodshim, and now you have one was done outside and one was done inside. So, Harishon chayav karet, because kodshim was done outside, so you have karet for it and lashes. And shnehem sofkim et arba'im. The first one gets lashes because it was kodshim that was done outside. The second one gets lashes because it was kodshim that was brought in the temple when you weren't allowed to because of otovet beno. It gets lashes because of otovet beno and shnehem psulim, and it's disqualified. Both are disqualified. The first one because it was kodshei chutz and shchutei chutz, you slaughtered outside, and the second one because it wasn't its day to be brought as a sacrifice, because once you slaughtered the mother, you're no longer allowed to slaughter this, and therefore you shouldn't have brought it into the temple to sacrifice. Okay, case 11. Chulin bifnim ubachutz. Now we have the other possibility. We have chulin inside and outside. So the first one was inside. That's already a problem, right? But again, it's not punishable. It's just harishon pasul. You can't eat it. Upatur, but you're not going to get obligated lashes or anything because you just didn't fulfill a positive commandment. Hasheni sofeget arba'im v'kasher. The second one you get lashes and it's kosher. In other words, right, because it's chulin, it was done outside, so you can actually eat the meat, but you get lashes because of otovet beno. Finally, last case here in the Mishnah, kodshim bifnim ubachutz. You have kodshim that were first done inside, the second one was done outside. Harishon kasher upatur. The first one's totally fine because it was a sacrifice that was done properly. And hasheni sofeget arba'im upasul. The second one, you get lashes for it, and it's disqualified because you did it outside the temple. Okay, end of our 12 cases. Now we're going to move on to the Gemara. And the Gemara wants to know how we know it's b'mukdashim, and then how do we know it's also in chulin. So Tana Rabbanan, we're going to bring a braita to prove all this, and then we're going to ask a question on the braita. Minay la'otovet b'noshan uheg b'mukdashim. How do you know that it's relevant for sacrifices as well? Maybe it's just when you eat meat on your own. Talmud Lamar, shor o kesef o ez ki yivaled, uchtiv batre v'shor ose otovet b'no lo tishchetu b'yom echad. We learn from juxtaposition. As I mentioned before, the pasuk before was all about sacrifices. Don't bring it as a sacrifice until it's 8 days old, but you can slaughter it for your own purpose. So that's only in sacrifices. So this pasuk is right next to it. It must be in sacrifices. So then they say, okay, well, if that's the case, ema b'mukdashim im b'chulin lo. Maybe it's only for sacrifices and not for chulin, but our Mishna said it's chulin also. So, shor hifsika inyan. Because the pasuk before said shor, or kesef o ez, and this pasuk said v'shor, or se, if it was just a continuation, it wouldn't have started again with shor. The fact that it starts again with shor tells you we're starting something new. To which the braita asks, okay, wait. So then they say, actually, I think it's the Gemara already talking, ve'ema b'chulin im b'mukdashin lo. Why don't we say just chulin then? In other words, if we say shor hifsika inyan, then maybe it completely starts a new section. We don't connect it to the previous, to which they answer k'tiv v'shor. But it says and shor. So we're basically going to say the fact that it starts with shor means it's different from the previous, which means the previous was kadesh, this is chulin. But then because it says vav and shor, it connects the two. And that means that it's also mukdashim. And that's how we get to this combo, that it's also mukdashim, but it's also chul. To which the Gemara asks, wait a minute. Ima kodashim kilayim lo. If we're going to say we're going to learn this from sacrifices, in the case about sacrifices, then it should be like sacrifices. Now, sacrifices, kilayim lo. You're not allowed to bring a crossbred animal. It's a crossbreed between two types of animals. You can't bring it as a sacrifice. So, you might say, Af otova et beno kilayim lo. Maybe then otova et beno should have the same criteria as sacrifices, which means that if you have a crossbreed of two animals, it's a crossbreed, then maybe you can do otova et beno. Maybe it's out of the parameters of this halacha. And if that's the case, then alama tanya, why does it say otova et beno noheg bekilayim ubekoi? But there's a braita that says it is noheg in kilayim. Also, by the way, in koi. A koi is a suffix chaya, suffix be'ema. It's going to be in that case also. Now, we're not going to deal with the koi right now. The point is that if we're learning it from mukdashim, then shouldn't it be just like mukdashim and not be by kilayim? Ve'od. Now here, it's a ve'od, which is, we go backwards for a minute, because it's a question really on this braita. We just said a minute ago, right, we wanted to say, theoretically, you would think it's not noheg be'kilayim. And then they said, but the braita says it is. And od, now to ask on this braita about the braita that says it's bekilayim, sektiv. The pasuk says se. Okay, so what? Turning now to Amabed. Amar Rava, ze bana av. Rava says the word se creates a paradigm. Kol makom shenemar se eno ela lotzi et hakilayim. When it says se, it means a complete se, meaning not a crossbreed. And it tries to, that word is a catchphrase for this doesn't apply to kilayim. So now we're a little bit stuck. If we learn it from mukdashim, it doesn't apply to kilayim. If we say it says se, it doesn't apply to kilayim. But the braita says it applies to kilayim. So how can we explain that? So Amar Kra, o lerabot et hakilayim. Okay, the pasuk says o, sure, o se. Now, normally se means no kilayim. And mukdashim, because it's related to mukdashim, we would think not kilayim. But there's a special drasha in this pasuk. Oh, the word o, shor o se, or se, right? An ox or a sheep. O comes to tell you, oh, by the way, this includes an additional case, even a crossbreed. Okay, that, we can end our daf right here. But we still have Holam Ubed. Why? Because now we're going to get into, wait a minute, how can you make a drasha on this word o? Don't you need the word o for something else? For the simple reading, really, which is, Hai o mebaile lechalek. You need to know it's either a shor or a se. If it said shor v'se, otov epino lo tishchatu b'yom echad, what would you have thought? Desal kadat hachamina, ad shachet shor ubeno, se ubeno lo mechayev. Maybe you won't get lashes. You might remember we've had this in a bunch of sugyot. Maybe you won't get lashes unless you do a shor and a se, it and its son, its offspring, all in one day. Meaning that you can't use a vav there, right? The o is not necessary. Again, the whole thing, and keep this in your head the whole rest of the sugya, o lerabot et kilayim. O is an extra word, and it comes to include kilayim, that you're going to be prohibited even if the animal is a crossbreed, okay, for otov et beno. So now we say, no, the o is needed for the simple reading, lechalek, to know that it's either a shor or a se. If it said shor and se, otov et beno lo tishchatu b'yom echad, what would you have thought? You have to kill a shor and a se and both their offsprings in order to be obligated. Comes the o to say no. To which they say, what do you mean? You can learn lechalek from a different word. Okay, what word? We're going to now try two different words. First, lechalek mi beno nafka. It says otova et beno. Beno, you might notice, is singular. It's, right? It's literally its son, right? Which here means its offspring, okay? But its offspring, it's singular, which means it's obviously only one son, so then it's either the shor or the says son, right? And then you would know. To which they say, no, that's not good enough. Akate mibaile lechadatanya. No, you still need it because, look at this braita. Ilu ne'amar shor v'seu beno, if it said shor and the se, and its son, its offspring, what would you have thought? Hayiti, right? Remember, offspring is singular. Hayiti omeo ad yishchot shor v'se ubeno. You might think you need to slaughter an ox, a sheep, and the offspring of one of them. Beno doesn't help you enough. because you still have the shor and the se. Shor and se, both of them, and one of the offspring. Maybe only then are you going to be obligated. Talmud Lamal, shor o se o tovet beno. And what do they assume? My love may o nafkalin. Now they quote the pasuk, they don't say which word we're darshaning. But you assume shor o se must be the o, which is coming to differentiate. To which they say, and then again, we're back to square one. O is l'rabot kilayim. How could we say O is l'chalek? Can't use O for two different things. To which they say, lo me oto. The word that we're looking to darshan here, in this drasha, don't think it's you have to slaughter 3 animals to be obligated, is the word oto. Oto is singular. Okay, there's a lot of singular words here. Oto, beno. Oto means it, okay? The animal. There you see, it's singular. It doesn't say otam vet beno. Otam vet beno would mean 3 people. Otam vet benam would mean 4 people, right? Shor, set, and both their offspring. So, Oto is there to teach you, right? Beno means only one offspring. Oto teaches you only one of the parents, okay? Of the either the shor or the set. So now our O is free, okay? And now we're good. O l'rabot kilayim, Oto l'chalek. So we're good, right? To say this, remember, l'chalek means this or that, and not both. Now we have a problem, though, because there's another machloket. A machloket between Chananya and the rabbis about whether Oto vet beno applies to males and females, parents, or just the females. Now, in that drasha, Chananya is going to use the word Oto for his position. So the Gemara says like this, okay, without seeing everything inside, because it's going to take us the rest of the daf to see it inside. In fact, we won't even get to Rabbi Chananya till tomorrow fully, but anyway, they're going to say, Hani chala rabbanan, dimiyater lehu Oto. According to the rabbis who don't need the word Oto, you can say this. O l'rabot kilayim, Oto l'chalek. Ela l'chanyanya, de lo miyater le'oto, l'chalek menale. But according to Chananya, where's he gonna learn l'chalek? Because O is l'rabot kilayim, Oto is to prove his position. So where are you going to get l'chalek? So now we're going to answer according to Chananya before we get to, okay, what's Chananya and the rabbis? So just have in your head, the Chananya uses the word Oto for his drasha and the rabbis don't. But, okay, we're now going to say, so for the rabbis, Oto is free. But, according to Chananya, where are you going to get the l'chalek? How do you know that shor ose, right? In other words, it's not as if it doesn't need the O because the O is for something else. If it had said shor en se, you still would have assumed that it's two different, that it's either or. How do we know that? So l'chalek lo tzarich kra. He says you don't need a drasha for it. Why? Dissever like Rabbi Yonatan. Now this might have reminded you of this. It might not have, but if it did, okay, or if it didn't, we're going to remind you of this machloka between Rabbi Yoshia and Rabbi Yonatan, and we're going to basically say he's on Rabbi Yonatan's side that anytime it even says "and" in the Torah, it means "or." Okay, unless it specifies. Okay, so that's what we're going to read right now. We've had this in many sugyot. Tanya. Isha sher kalel et aviv et imo. Person who curses his father and his mother. Now, notice, someone curses his father and his mother. So, en li al aviv imo. Sounds like you have to curse both your parents in order to be obligated. Aviv shelo imo imo shelo aviv. What if you just curse your father or just curse your mother? How do we know you're going to be obligated? Minayin. Talmud lomar, aviv v'imo kilel. Aviv kilel, imo kilel. Okay, the pasuk starts off with Isha she'er kalel et aviv. The word kilel, the verb, curse, is right next to the word father. At the end of the pasuk, it repeats the word kilel, and it says aviv v'imo kilel, and the mother word is right next to kilel. So the drasha here of divrei Rabbi Yeshaya says that's how we learn if you curse each one individually. But without that, you would have thought both of them together. That's Rabbi Yoshia. He thinks you need some word like O or some other drasha to tell you that it's either or. Otherwise, the default is end means end. Okay, like you would have thought in modern Hebrew. Rabbi Yonatan omer, mashma shnehem ke'echad u'mashma echad b'fnei atzmo. When you read the word end, it could be both together. It also could be each one individually. Ad shifro lecha katuv yachtav. Unless it says together, it means either or. Okay? So he has a principle in the Torah. Okay, again, this wouldn't be a modern Hebrew probably, but in the Torah, when it uses the word end, it often means or. Okay, so now that fits in, and that answers our question. According to Chananya, he must hold, we're just going to assume, he holds like Rabbi Yonatan. So that's why he doesn't have the word oto free, but that doesn't bother us because you don't need a special drasha lechalek. So O is not needed lechalek, and neither is oto, because oto he needs for his drasha. You just don't need a drasha for O, so lechalek, and therefore the word O is free to tell us l'rabot et kilayim. Okay, it always goes back to that drasha. So now we want to know my Chananya, my Rabbanan. Ditan, as it says in a braita. Oto ve'et beno noheg b'nekevot ve'eno noheg b'scharim. The rabbis say it's only females. Chananya omer, right? It's only the mother and her offspring. It's not obviously the offspring could be male or female, but the mother is the parent, right? Is the mother. Okay, the oto. Now it's a little bit weird. That's why I said when I was translating it, oto literally means him. Okay, it's tricky because it's masculine. Okay, that's going to be part of the problem here. But comes Chananya and he says it's male and female. The rabbis say male and female. I just said it wrong. The rabbis say female, not male. Chananya omer noheg ben b'scharim uben b'nekevot. Chananya says no, it's male and female. Okay. Now we're going to see my Talmud Rabbanan. What's the reason? Ditanya. Okay. Now you're going to see in tomorrow's daf. Chananya's reason comes to the word oto because oto is masculine. And that's going to say, it must include males as well. Okay? That's his drasha on oto. But we're not going to even get to that today. Right now we're going to see the rabbis. So what's their reason? Yachol tehei oto vet beno noheg bein b'scharim bein b'nekevot. You might have thought oto vet beno is either male, right? Male and female, which he's going to say it's not. Vidinhu. Now he's going to say it's logical to say, I'm going to tell you why it's only female from a logical argument. Where are we going to learn it from? I told you we get to this comparison of shiluach haken, sending away the mother bird. Chiev, now that's aim alabanim. It's the mother only. So he's going to say, chiev kam v'chiev be'em alabanim, right? Both, and again, as I told you, the commentaries all connect also from a conceptual perspective. They're very similar. So chiev kam v'chiev be'em alabanim, right? Both are cases with parent offspring. Ma k'shechiev be'em alabanim b'nekevot v'lo b'scharim. So just like there, it's the mother. Here it must be also the female. Lo, you can't do that kavachomer because you could say there it's limited. What's it limited to? Ki kare. That's what it says in the pasuk. If you happen upon a chick, not if it's owned by you. It's not relevant if it's owned by you. But Tomar Oto vet beno shasabo mizuman k'she'eno mizuman. But Oto vet beno applies to animals you own, animals you don't own. It applies across the board. So if it applies to more cases, then maybe it applies also to more animals, to also the males, not only the females. Talmud lomar oto echav lo shnayim. But he says the drasha is, now this is a little tricky. Didn't we say oto? He doesn't have oto in his drasha. We're going to talk about this in a minute. But anyway, he says oto. The rabbis say oto echav lo shnayim. Oto is singular. That means one and not the other. And if you're going to say one and not the other, which are you going to choose, the male or the female? Well, now once already we know that it's limiting it, then we can limit it, then we can learn back from Shiluach HaKen. In other words, to limit it, we can't learn from Shiluach HaKen. But once it's limited, which one we're going to limit to, we're going to learn from the Em Alabanim case. So, chiev kan v'chiev be'em alabanim, mash chiev be'em alabanim b'nekevot v'lo b'scharim, ach chiev kan b'nekevot v'lo b'scharim. Okay, so once we learn that it's only one, we're going to learn which one, the female, from there. But then the rabbis add, and this is why in the end we're going to say they don't really need oto, and that's why oto is free for them lechalek, right? Assuming they hold about Rabbi Yoshia that you need lechalek, that viv would have confused you, but oto teaches you only one of them. Well, he says, and if you don't like my argument, I'll give you a different one. And who's that? How do animals work? Right? In our family environment, so the children follow the mother and the father, and they live together. But in animal life, it's usually the mother that takes care of her own, and the father, is not the animal is not attached at all to their father. And therefore, the beno, the son of it, means it must be the female, because that's the one that the son follows around, or the offspring follows around. So now the Gemara asks, why do you need a second claim? What was wrong with the first one? Well, oto zachar mashma. Well, you might say oto's not a great drasha, because oto does sound masculine. His, like I told you, that's the way you translate it, right? Him and not her. So, Harehu Omer beno misha beno karuch acharav yatzas achar she'en beno karuch acharav, and that's why in the end the beno is a stronger argument. Okay, and with that we finish our daf. So again, what's the point here? The point at the end was the word oto, even though the rabbis did use it in the first part of their drasha, in the end, they really learn it from the beno part. In which case, the word oto is free, oto is lechalek, back to the original drasha, o is to include kilayim. And that's why even though we would have thought to exclude kilayim because it's mukdashim, and the word se usually excludes kilayim, but the word o includes it. According to Chananya, we don't need a word lechalek. Oto is used to prove it's also males. That's what we're going to get to in tomorrow's daf. Oto includes also males. O l'rabot et hakilayim, and you don't need a word lechalek because he holds by Rabbi Yonatan that anytime it says vav in the Torah, it could mean o just as well. And therefore, right, it means both really, in which case you have no need for any other word and everything fits it. Okay, so that was a good review of the second part of the daf, and that all came from where do we get oto beno is b'muktashim, is with sacrificial animals, and also with Chullin, and that came from the shore, vishor, and the shore of Chananya. It kind of split from the pasuk before, but also has the vav connecting it, and that's how we got to both of them. And then, doing the review backwards, okay, we had the Mishna about oto beno, and really we went into all the cases of the Chullin and muktashim and combinations and permutations that could be, and all the issues that could come up, and how many punishments there could be in each one, and whether the food is kosher or not kosher in each of those different permutations. And we started with, again, doing the daf and review in reverse, darkei amori, and when something is darkei amori, and what is considered and what is not considered, and how we figure that out. And with that, we got to the issue of having other people pray for mercy for you. And like I said, the mercy issue kind of seems to connect between the end of that chapter and the beginning of this. So if you think, when you write things and they're always you have to need a transition paragraph, right? The Gemara often does these transitions, even between Masechet to Masechet and often between chapter to chapter. With that, we finish for today. Wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom.